Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast. My name is David Higgins. I'm so excited that you are here with us this week, episode 4 of Ukraine Nonprofits Under Fire. And I'm not here alone. I also have my co-host all the way from Lviv, Ukraine, Sandra Curry. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, David. We're actually so excited for this episode to come out, and we're can't wait to give you some updates on the baby and on Joshua House and some news, what's been going on in Ukraine.
So we have some really important news. What's taking place in Ukraine among the nonprofits there? There are some that have come to real danger this last week. We want to bring you up to date on that. Let's go ahead and start with what's happening with Joshua House in Lviv and what is taking place around them. They've had some really wonderful areas of connecting with people in their community. Sandra, Colton, talk to us a little bit about Joshua House.
Joshua House is actually doing a lot of great things. This past week we have sent and raised 400 boxes of groceries to be delivered to Irpin, Bucha, and Hostomel. And people were actually really excited to receive boxes of food. Some of our workers of Joshua House, they went to Irpin, Bucha, and Hostomel to deliver the groceries.
Wow, that's brave. I'm so glad they're there to do that. What else have you guys been doing?
We've tried to get involved with Samaritan's Purse and another shelter that's local to Ukraine. And we're trying to see how we can help them in any way. Opening this house up to them, trying to see if we can house any people that they may not have the room for.
Yes, we did show them the place, and we showed them where can they be located, and they're still trying to get back with us if they are going to locate here, but it seems like they really like what we're offering them.
This last week, we have had nonprofits in the line of fire like never before. As tensions escalate, as the veil comes off of what the Russian soldiers are doing in the controlled territory areas, there is this place where the Russians no longer care what the world thinks of them and is unilaterally abusing even nonprofit foreign workers that are coming in to help the civilians, bring in water and food. The International Red Cross has lost a number of its vehicles, being shot at, as well as had injuries among their staff, trying to get into the Donbas region and trying to bring out refugees, women, children. That's as of today being Monday, the day that we're recording this episode for our Thursday release. Today, we saw 9 buses that were being brought in by a nonprofit called Help People. And the 9 drivers that were staffed with the nonprofit on a road that was considered to be put aside for this reason. And they're going to load them up with women and children and help them get out of this region. They ended up finding the buses alongside of the road. All 9 drivers have been taken by Russian military. They have been accused of kidnapping them. These 9 drivers are now being held in an undisclosed location. Some think they've been taken back into Russia. And then just following this, the area has been threatened with a chemical warfare. Now, as of you hearing this episode, you'll hear if it is true that they actually did drop nerve agents on Mariupol, among where the resistance is among the civilians in that region. And I sure hope that all the reports that we are hearing as of today end up being just scuttlebutt, you could say. But the truth is there's a good chance that it is not. And they've made a final attempt to take that city. Doing so, there's a number of nonprofits that have been caught in the crosshairs trying to bring aid to the civilians. Sandra, you're able to get a hold of Medical Teams International, and they spent some time with you. Is that right?
Yes, it was an amazing conversation with Dr. Trina Helderman. She's a global health advisor with Medical Teams International, and she just had a lot of great points to say on what they have been doing in Ukraine and what they're doing right now in Moldova and refugee centers, helping out Ukrainians and giving them all the medical attention and helping them with some humanitarian aid. It was just enjoy the conversation. Hi, everybody. Today I get a chance to interview Dr. Trina Helderman. She's a health advisor at Medical Teams International, and they're doing such an amazing job right now helping Ukraine in Moldova and Poland. And they're sending a lot of aid to the places, and they're actually helping in shelters too. I just want to know how you're doing today.
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Thank you. Appreciate you taking the time to interview me.
We just love, to have the opportunity to interview you guys. It's amazing to know what you're doing right now and dive into it. We just wanted to know, what is kind of your story on how the Medical Teams International started and how you grew so much over the past 43 years?
Yeah, so Medical Team started back in 1979, and it was founded by a guy named Ron Post. And he, looked at the resources and such that he had where he lived, and saw the need elsewhere, and worked with several volunteers for the first response to go to Thailand to support refugees coming out of Cambodia. So that was the very first Medical Team's response. And from there, it has been kind of founded on the principles of volunteerism. And so taking qualified doctors and nurses and whatnot to different emergencies. So Ethiopian famine, Rwandan genocide, and Albania and Kosovo, Afghanistan. And now we have 8 country programs that we're supporting, both with volunteers, and then we've kind of advanced to be more as an international humanitarian organization. So with stable programs, particularly in places with refugees or recurrent emergencies. And so we currently are working in Ethiopia, Sudan, Uganda, Bangladesh, Tanzania, Colombia, Lebanon, and Guatemala. And then, as you noted, recently started a response, and we're focusing in now on just Moldova and in Ukraine, with some supports going to different partners in other locations. But at the moment, it's predominantly Moldova and Ukraine.
That's amazing to have a heart to help the refugees, especially what's going on in Ukraine right now. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
We know that you're working with some other organizations as Integra, and there's others, as we know, to ensure that humanitarian aid and supplies they get into Ukraine. Is there any other organizations you're working with on the ground?
So in Moldova, we actually used to work in Moldova, and ended our program there back in 2016. And we're doing some medical supply donations and also training in basic life support and first aid. And so during that time, we partnered with an organization called Coram Deo, which is a local organization in Moldova. So we have been working with them. They're doing hygiene and like toiletry kits for the refugees coming into Moldova. We've also been working with Emmanuel Medical Clinics, which is a local medical provider in Moldova that have a couple of clinics where they provide care, particularly for people who don't have resources and aren't able to access care well otherwise. We've also worked with IOM in partnership in Moldova to make some connections. And then we've had a lot of communication with local churches, both in Moldova and in Ukraine, who have helped us as we've been trying to understand, what's going on, what are the needs. A lot of these local churches are supporting shelters, providing food, providing transport, also providing, just basic needs that people have. And so really communicating with them, trying to understand what they're seeing, what the needs are, also trying to figure out how do we support them. They're already responding. They were the first ones there to, open the doors and welcome people in. And so seeing how do we not take that from them, but how do we support them and enable them to keep going and providing the supports that they are identifying that people need.
In your opinion, how important is to have those connections, with different organizations and working even with them?
Yeah, I think it's huge, particularly if you're working with either local organizations or organizations who were already working in the place of the emergency. they understand context, they understand how things typically function within that location. They probably know language, culture, all of the things that we, as an international NGO, we come with a lot of resources, but we don't necessarily know and understand how things work locally or understand the impact certain emergencies may have because it's a new context, a new culture, a new language. And so working with those partners is really important from that side. But then also medical teams just focuses on health for the most part, health and nutrition. When there are other needs that we identify, particularly around shelter or food or like cash assistance, that type of thing, those aren't necessarily sectors that we're very strong in or that we've done before. And so finding other partner organizations that's their specialty, it's really helpful to work together in that way so that you can provide a more holistic response for people and not something that just focuses in on one area. Also, you want to be as efficient as possible. So trying not to duplicate coordinating with the other organizations to make sure, okay, you're covering this, we'll cover something else, instead of everyone trying to do the same thing. And then you're not using your resources that often are limited very efficiently to provide the most good.
But also, whenever you send teams into Moldova or let's say Poland, because we do help out in Poland too. How is it with volunteers? And is it somebody that is already working with you guys, your staff, or volunteers?
Yeah, so the team that went into Poland initially and then shifted over to Romania and Moldova were medical team staff. So we have full-time staff that are on our emergency response team. Like myself, I was actually in on the first team that went into Moldova. And we provide the structure and the foundation around identifying the needs, doing the coordination, and setting up the programs. Yeah. And then we bring volunteers particularly in to do the medical care. So if there's a need for providing direct clinical care to patients, we will bring in volunteer doctors and nurses, mental health providers that will come in for short term, but we have hired medical team staff that will provide that structure and kind of long-term foundation as volunteers kind of cycle through. In other responses, we may hire clinicians locally. So if there's a lot of doctors and nurses that don't have jobs, for example, then we will hire them locally rather than bringing volunteers. But in the situation with Moldova currently, there's not a lot of extra doctors and nurses who aren't already working within the government system. And we don't want to take away from that system and create a problem with accessing care for the local community and population of Moldova. So this is adding an extra buffer that isn't there, that we have been able to identify currently.
As a lot of us know that Moldova is one of the poorest country in Europe. And did you guys personally have any issue getting supplies into Moldova or just lack of supplies at all?
Not so much lack of supplies at the moment. There's still a lot of supplies and things available within Moldova itself. One of the challenges has been that a lot of the supplies, particularly medications and pharmaceuticals, came from Ukraine and Russia. And so that supply chain has been broken. And so the suppliers within Moldova have had to go to other locations, particularly within Europe, to get their supplies. And so that has not yet, that we have seen, led to any lack of supplies, just higher prices at the moment. Yeah. And that's also, I think, the case for just general supplies within shops in the market. We had one gentleman that was working with us who also has a few basic generalist shops in Moldova. And he was noting that the prices for things are going up simply because they're having to pay, for importation or other things, which they didn't have to do previously, or they're having to move them from further away versus just from Ukraine. And so the prices are going up. But so far, we haven't seen a gap in supplies overall. Yeah, in Moldova at least.
From some of the volunteers and workers that you have on staff right now in Moldova and Poland, have you personally heard any stories that touched your heart?
We actually don't have staff in Poland now. We have everyone is in Moldova and then working on moving into Ukraine. Some of the stories we've heard, and I've shared this story before, but it was really meaningful to me, was one of the families that we met in one of the shelters in Moldova noted that, they had just finished making dinner. They sat down to have dinner and the phone rang and it was someone telling them, hey, we're evacuating. If you want to come, you have to leave in like 3 minutes. And so they kind of like looked at each other, got up from the table, grabbed a bunch of things, and then went out the door. And, their comment was probably our dinner is still sitting at the table. And just thinking about how quickly people needed to make decisions, how quickly they needed to leave, and how, if I only had 3 minutes to decide what important things am I going to take from my house, would I be able to think through that correctly? You understand how people forgot their medications or maybe forgot passports or documents and such. So that was a really powerful. And I think also when I was there and we were standing at the border, kind of observing what was going on and seeing people cross, there was one woman who crossed and had, she was carrying a couple of bags. She had maybe a 6-year-old daughter and maybe 3 or 4-year-old son that was with her. And there was like a bridge. So as they crossed the bridge, there's a road that, wasn't really blocked off. There's kind of cars and lots of people around. And, this woman comes across carrying a bunch of bags with these 2 little kids. And she just has this face of like, I have no idea what I need to do now. And then one of the kids starts running off and, gets afraid that he's going to get into traffic. And so she's trying to like manage all of this and still under that stress of, I just left. I'm not sure what to do. I don't speak the language here necessarily in Moldova, as the, Ukrainians speak Ukrainian, but in Moldova, it's either Russian or Romanian, with Romanian being the main language. And so I think that just the look on her face and the confusion and also a bit of fear of not knowing, what's going to happen next. What do I need to do now? How do I take care of my kids? I can't imagine all the things. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to speak with her directly, but just recognizing the decisions that people are having to make and the trauma that some of them have been through, depending on where they're coming from, is just really immense.
Yeah, I know a lot of stories, of people that came out Mariupol and from the east side. It's just heartbreaking to see all of these.
Absolutely.
They just left everything behind and all of it destroyed, all of their lives. Like they're just nothing right now.
Yeah, it's incredible to think that you could just be, going to school or going to your job and then suddenly the next day you're having to run. I can't quite imagine. I've been doing this a long time and I still don't have words or a way to really truly comprehend what that feels like.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's just it's a lot of pain you have to go through, especially being the people who have to evacuate so fast and leaving everything behind. It's just really a deal breaker and a heartbreak. It's a really heartbreaking situations right now. I would like to ask our listeners, they would like to know how they can help you out, guys. How can they connect with you? And if you have any supplies, need of supplies, financially, maybe you can tell us about how can they connect and do that.
If people wanted to go to our website, medicalteams.org, we've got some stories and some information about the work that we're doing in Ukraine, and we are accepting financial donations. With that money, some of it will go to some of the local organizations that we're meeting and working with to try to help sustain them so that they can continue doing the work that they're doing. that will go to the sending the doctors and nurses, medical supplies, whatnot that we need to send in. I think one of the things is it's really good to just be informed. We're talking about how people's lives have just kind of been turned upside down, and it's good to be aware that these things are happening. So I'm sitting here in the United States now, and we see like gas prices going up and different things. And it's easy to complain like, oh, how come I'm paying extra for my gas now for my car? If you know that there's another story on the other side that, there's this conflict and people's lives are being turned upside down, then you can actually accept like, okay, it's a very tiny price for me to pay for a bit higher price for my fuel. So I think that's also important. Medical teams does collect medical supply donations, but they're usually from big suppliers. So small donations we aren't accepting at the moment. Monetary donations we are. And if there's any doctors or nurses that would be interested in going out, maybe not necessarily for Moldova or Ukraine, but even in the future, medical teams has a roster that doctors, nurses, medical providers can sign up to, can call on you if there is a time when we do need volunteers to go out.
Would you like to share anything else, maybe that we left out on our side about on questions, or you just want to share some important information?
Yeah, I think one thing that I kind of mentioned, but is just a really remarkable thing to see in this response. So I've been doing this for 14 years, and for 5 years I was on like the first in teams for emergency responses. In that time, I have never seen the incredible outpouring of local volunteerism and support that I have seen with this response. The local volunteers, the community organizations, the teachers, the doctors, the nurses, the moms in Poland and Hungary and Slovakia and in Moldova, Romania, and likewise in Western Ukraine, just the way that people are just stepping up in whatever way they possibly can to support those who've been affected by this crisis. It is honestly extremely humbling and also extremely encouraging towards humanity. Like, just that people are giving whatever they have to try to support and to care for those who've been displaced and affected. I have never seen anything this overwhelming, and it's just a beautiful thing. Want to congratulate all of those who have stepped up and have really done even something that seems so tiny has really been compounded into a really big difference that we have seen. So that has been just really encouraging and amazing to see.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of nonprofits helping out Ukraine right now, especially US. We know that there's a lot of nonprofits and everybody's trying to help out Ukraine. It's just amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You're very welcome.
Everybody, to all of our listeners, make sure to visit medicalteamsinternational.org.
What an incredible interview. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Yeah, it was just such an amazing conversation with her. And she definitely had a lot of good points to say. And how are they helping right now in Moldova with the refugee centers? And she was actually there on the ground helping. It was really an amazing conversation.
Charity Watch said that their organization is, how did they put it? One of the top out of the top 20 organizations working over there right now. Incredibly trusted group of people. Sandra and Colton, you have a pretty exciting week ahead of you. In fact, tonight, tomorrow, your child may be joining us. I cannot wait to meet your upcoming baby and you will text me, I'm sure, as soon as you know.
Yeah, we actually were, but we had some issues along the way, so
I wouldn't say as much issues as the baby is stubborn.
Yes, baby is being really.
You mean her scheduling calendar didn't meet with your scheduling calendar?
Yeah, we had some miscommunication.
Okay.
Yeah,
well.
whatever.
Oh, did you just blow it? Oh my goodness. To you that has been listening to this podcast, thank you for your love of Ukraine. Thank you for how you're helping, how you're giving. There is so much that is still to come as far as the ability for us to be able to help mend and heal the lives of the broken and the wounded. And there are some in our neighborhoods. There is a complete crisis taking place there in Ukraine. If you're listening to this and you have the ability to help financially with Joshua House, there is a link right below this episode. Please log on there, give as you're able, and allow the world to be a safer place, a better place, as those that are able and in place to do so can help heal and hug and bring some solace to those that have lost so much. You have an amazing day. I look forward to speaking to you in just a few more days. Bye now. This episode is brought to us by the book Demystifying Fundraising Funnels. It is a digital marketing blueprint to fund your nonprofit. Now, have you ever been in that situation where you're like, David, we're stuck right now. We've got these tactile fundraising that we're doing, and we're needing them to grow because right now in this climate, the last few years has been pretty brutal. Well, what this book does is shows you how to accent what you already have going and to launch new ideas and fresh ideas using online tools. And it will allow you to thrive versus just survive.